a.m. Are we ready, guys?
We're ready.
Awesome. Okay, it is 10 a.m. I'll call this meeting to order. There we go. The curriculum and instruction meeting for June 11th, 2025. And we're going to open up to public comment. And then I just want to make a quick note that we're going to have public comment be for 3 minutes. There has been some confusion about public comment being 2 or 3 minutes. So because it's on the agenda for 3 minutes, we're going with 3 minutes. All right? So I don't want, and then we're going to clarify for the next one. Okay. All right. Everybody's good? Perfect. All right. Go ahead. And the first person I have here for public comment is Chani Dima. Did I pronounce that correctly? Perfect. Thank you.
I'm with you. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
I just got comfortable.
Is there a microphone?
Yes.
Oh.
You can step to the
Sorry, I
podium.
can't hear anything.
I know it's a little different
Step to
setup.
the podium here. Microphone should be working.
The following are the voices of the children of RVP. Going to the bathroom got me bullied. Playing on the playground got me bullied. This school did nothing. Some kids simply do not do well in an overcrowded environment. The constant noise and lack of personal space is too much for me. I do not feel safe in school. I can focus better at home and my grades reflect that. A few years ago, some kids posted on social media that they wanted to shoot some people of color, but they used a different word. This is at my home school, and if you don't fund virtual, you're asking me to go to school every single day, scared. I was very heavily bullied, so heavily, in fact, that something as casual as going to the bathroom would get me bullied every day. So when my mom couldn't get the school to help me, we decided that I would be educated somewhere else. I have depression and anxiety due to my terrible experiences going to school. Being in online school is like the best thing to do for me and my fellow students. I was too scared to approach my teachers and ask for help. Since I have joined RVP, I have gotten more confident and was able to ask for help. Being on the spectrum, I am very concerned about being bullied by people who don't understand or like me because I am different. The virtual program has given me a safe place to learn. I struggled to focus in the brick and mortar classroom. I was harassed and stalked by an older boy while my school did nothing but excuse his behavior. At my old school, I was relentlessly bullied by so many people it was impossible to stop the incidents. I had detrimental self-harm thoughts about myself, and I realized I couldn't stay at my school any longer. In RVP, no one bullies me or makes fun of me so that I can feel safe while I'm learning. And through an interpreter, a student shared that the bullying at school gave her very low self-esteem and suicidal thoughts. She no longer wanted to go to school, but in RVP, everything has improved. Her thoughts, her grades, her behavior, she even speaks English more. Thank you.
That's my turn.
And so next we have Rania Dima.
Hi, my name is Rania Dima. Because of my blindness, it's hard to read my own comments aloud, so my daughter's going to read the comments for me.
Last year, on May 15th, FCPS advised the Board of Education to cut RVP elementary and middle while keeping the high school. At 4 hours and 17 minutes and in the board budget questions, FCPS states that there will be no changes to the RVP high school. Why then was it completely removed? Instead, FVS now offers full-time enrollment. Students went from 20 hours of live instructions per week down to 8. Instead of a Schoology teacher-led platform, it shifted to a read-to-learn model. Was this committee aware of the change in delivery of the curriculum at FVS? What will be done to help transition the kids from the daily instructions and the structure of RVP to a less structured, more flexible model of the FVS full-time enrollment? What about those who need the structure? Where will they go once they leave middle school? In-person didn't work. Will RVP grade bands expand with them? Data and testimony show that RVP has improved the academics and well-being of those with IEPs and 504s, or who have suffered bullying and trauma in person. From the testimonies in the FVS RVP presentation, the differences between the two is clear. Kids are thriving in the structured setting of RVP, while others thrive in the flexibility of full-time enrollment. Can FVS not offer both? If FVS is a school with its own school code, shouldn't the money follow the children? $9,226 times 442 projected students is $4.7 million. This is just the foundation funding alone to fund what these kids need. Factor in the 46.7% in RVP who are farm and the 36.1% who are IEP, and the funding increases significantly. My youngest only has one more year of middle school, and I am concerned. She is soaring in RVP, but the read-to-learn format of FVS will not work for her. Thank you.
Let's go, Jonathan. Let's go.
Okay, and then we have Melissa Medwood.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Melissa Medwood, and I'm here as a parent of 3 students that began virtual learning in 2020. I would like to express my strong support for continuing and expanding the virtual education for our students. Virtual learning empowers students by offering flexible, personalized education that meets diverse learning needs. It breaks down barriers and enables access to high-quality instruction, innovative resources, and unique opportunities. With the right balance of support, virtual learning fosters independence, self-discipline, and digital fluency. My oldest son, who completed his high school education virtually, just finished his first year of college on the Dean's List. He's thriving academically and socially. He's an independent and confident student, and he credits this to the flexible, innovative, and supportive environment he had at FCVS. My middle son is a 10th grader at FCVS. He's an A student who works very hard to be successful. He's meticulous, diligent, and has persevered to adapt to the changes that FCVS has been going through. He's a curious learner who needs a quiet environment to be successful. This is a need that cannot be met in person. He's learned how to work independently, advocate for his needs, and access support. Recently, he had to go in person for MCAT testing. When he had difficulty focusing due to the distractions in the testing room, he felt comfortable enough to advocate for himself and leave after 2 sections, hoping the room would be quieter the next day. Mr. Watson was aware of this and personally followed up to check in and make sure that everything was okay and support his choice to go back. That made my son feel supported, engaged, and confident. My youngest son is a 6th grader at RVP. He's an A student in the Gifted and Talented program. His learning is personalized, and he receives enrichment to keep him challenged and engaged. He has health issues that led to chronic absenteeism when he was in person, which interfered with his learning. Being in virtual school this year, he has missed 1 day and part of 1 morning. Otherwise, he's been able to manage his symptoms while staying connected to the school. When he wasn't feeling well and missed his first period class recently, every one of his teachers knew that he hadn't been feeling well when he joined their meets. I don't know how. He doesn't know how. The attentiveness and connection the teachers have to the students is invaluable. The teachers, guidance counselors, staff, and administrators for both of these virtual schools are exceptional, engaged, supportive, innovative, and always in communication with both students and families. They know our children, they're involved, dedicated, and welcome the involvement of parents. I urge this committee to continue supporting and investing in virtual learning options for families who choose them. Thank you. And we're celebrating our 1-year anniversary today of getting our schools back.
There you go.
If I may.
I'm reading this with permission on behalf of my daughter, Brianne. I just want to say thank you to everyone who helped make this school year so special for me. This year, I had a lot of fun learning from home instead of going to school in person. One of the biggest reasons I liked staying home was because I felt safe. I wasn't scared about getting bullied, and that made a huge difference in how I felt every day. I was able to focus on my learning and just be myself without worrying about anything else. I'm really happy to be part of this school. From the very beginning, the teachers have been so nice and kind to me. I felt like I was treated with respect, and that really helped me feel more confident. Excuse me. Every time I needed help, there was always someone there to support me. That's something I'll never forget. RVP has been such a great experience for me. I want to thank everyone who worked so hard to keep the school going. I know there were people who were really determined to save RVP, my mom one of them, and help students like me. You are awesome, and I'm so grateful for everything you've done. There were times this year when I struggled with some of my assignments. I know it wasn't always easy for the teachers, especially when I had a lot of questions or needed extra help. But you never gave up on me. You helped me during power blocks, you explained things in different ways, and you encouraged me to keep trying. That made a big difference. Because of your help, school didn't feel so overwhelming anymore. So I just wanted to say, biggest thank yous from the bottom of my heart to all of you. Thank you to my teachers and Mr. Hooverby and all the families, parents, and my fellow students, and upper level support, so my mom says, to keep RVP running. You all care so much, and I care about everyone who supported me and my classmates. This year was one of the best school years I've had, and I'll always remember it. I look forward to 7th grade. What kid do you know says that? Thank you.
Is there anyone else who has a comment they'd like to make that didn't get a chance to sign up? All right. And then, let's see. We have some meeting minutes that we need to approve, correct? Have you guys had a chance to review the meeting minutes? Yes. Okay. I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Motion to approve.
Perfect. The meeting minutes from May 7th have been approved. All right, perfect. Board member comments. Okay. Who would like to get started? Jamie?
No, I'm just ready to get rolling. Thank you guys for being here.
Cole?
Let's go.
All right. Here, let it roll, right?
Agenda again, we're going to start off with the
Yes,
District
right.
Committee on Assessment, and then as we heard from public comment, we have our virtual school and RVP second, and then media services third. We'll try to get it all in.
Perfect.
So-
Thank you so much.
So joining me for the District Committee on Assessment is Dr. Better, the Director of Assessment, Data Reporting, and Strategic Improvement. So we co-lead this committee, and we're going to share with you an update of the work this year. So we're going to provide the background on the committee, why it exists, a summary of what we looked at as a committee, the feedback from the committee, and we're just going to quickly look at our assessment plan as a district. First, important to always point out that when we talk about required assessments and why we do them,
Can I just interrupt you for a second? We have some microphones,
Okay.
so I don't know if we can help with that. So if I can go get some microphones, but speak loud.
Sounds good.
That would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's just a matter of turning them on.
We'll get some microphones around.
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and continue while we distribute some microphones.
Yes.
So important to just sort of frame why we have required assessments in the first place. And it's just important to point out that depending on the audience, the same assessment can actually serve multiple different purposes. So let's take the iReady assessment, for example. For students and parents, it provides feedback on where students are right now. For teachers, it helps them see where students are in their class to adjust instruction. For principals, for schools, it helps see where classrooms are compared to each other. And as a district, it also helps us monitor school performance district-wide. So one assessment serving multiple purposes. The District Committee on Assessment comes from the More Learning, Less Testing Act of 2017, which requires us to have a committee of stakeholders, teachers, parents, and central office staff It also mandates that our required assessments can be no more than 2.2% of all instructional time. With the exception of grade 8, they added 0.1% because of a social studies assessment in 8th grade. And it also establishes that we have every other year cycle of forming this committee and reporting to the board on where things are. So for these purposes, the way we define assessment, this is anything that's mandated, either federal, state, or by us locally as a district, that measures academic readiness, learning progress, or skills. We use the term census assessment, meaning that assessments that are given to all students in a grade level, in a school, etc., or in a content area. And so for the purposes of this committee, that is the working definition of assessment for these purposes. So the role of the committee is to review those required assessments with an established rubric that's been developed. Look at the required time that it takes out of instruction for each and every one of those assessments, and making sure the purpose makes sense. Then the committee provides feedback about each one of those required assessments, how long they take, whether they're serving their right value, and then gives us feedback to constantly fine-tune our assessment plan. So the rubric that's established has these 7 areas that are looked at for every single required assessment. Purpose, their alignment to standards, the value of feedback it provides either to parents, to teachers, to schools, that they are accessible to students. We always look at the time they take. This ends up being a big part of the committee. How much time is it taking out of instruction? How they're administered, and whether we get results back in a timely manner so that the results just don't sit for too long before they can be acted upon. So Dr. Vetter is going to take it from there with the specifics that we looked at this year.
So we look at certain types of assessments. We look at screener assessments. Screener is usually brief, but not always. It's designed to provide some initial insight about performance and whether or not we need to test more robustly or maybe provide some sort of additional intervention. And the intervention could be for students who are struggling or for students who need more, right? A good thing. An example of a screener is our DIBELS assessment, which we use to kind of screen for initial struggling reading issues with foundational reading skills. We also use the COGAT to screen for potential placement in gifted and talented education. Then we have diagnostics, which provide in-depth analysis, often based on standards, such as our iReady assessment, which we administer in reading and math. And then we have a bunch of local assessments that we create within our curriculum teams, designed to evaluate how well students are progressing in learning our curriculum. And of course, we try and align these to sort of the model and the rigor of the state assessments too, to give us some indication of how well kids are going to do on these state assessments. So some of the themes from the district committee, first of all, we did meet the required 2.2% in each of our tested areas, so that's good news. One of the things that we talked about, especially from our teachers, is being precise not only in the amount of time it takes students, but of course the amount of time that it takes teachers to prepare for these assessments. And we know it does take some additional time. Overlapping testing windows. So in a little bit, I know Ms. Monia, you pointed out the importance of looking at the local assessment calendar, and we're going to take a brief look at that at the end. And you can see that we have various needs. We have school improvement needs, we have classroom needs, we have district level needs. And so trying to figure out a schedule that accommodates all of those needs, because we are a continuous improvement system, but also working within the confines of different assessment windows established by our different vendors and so on. And again, not only time for setting up for the assessment, but accommodations. Certain assessments, our screeners, we tend not to use any sort of accommodation because we want to figure out where kids truly are without support. But then some of our curriculum measures, we do allow the supports as dictated by an IEP, for example, or 504. Some additional themes, kind of the digital versus paper testing. Many of these assessments are administered digitally, so there are some challenges to that. The iReady example, sometimes we'll have students who will click a little bit too quickly. They may not be as invested in the assessment. The good news is it does flag those students, so we get some indication. But it is a different style of testing. But our state testing is all digital right now. AP tests are digital. SAT is digital. So, it behooves us to prepare our students for that particular testing environment. There certainly was a challenge this year that we heard from teachers with the elimination of the one-to-one in K through 2. There are a number of assessments that kids have to take in K through 2. DIBELS, kindergarten readiness assessment is coming back next year. iReady in certain cases, and so finding enough devices, which there may be a cart with a couple of devices that they have, but they have to share those. So there are certainly some challenges with that. Again, kind of balancing the needs of whether an assessment provides good information at the district level to evaluate our programs, need for professional learning, kind of school improvement purposes, and then also at the classroom teacher level for individual students. And again, transparency is important. We do post all of our local assessment calendars on the website.
Take a look at one.
Yeah, let's take a look at one. Let's go to elementary if we can.
No, of course it's not working.
So I wonder if it's going to a different screen. Maybe we need to escape from this.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I did print these out. A couple of these out. These are the testing windows, so you can see that.
If you just
Just looking at the testing windows, you can start to see how it gets to be.
So as we're pulling up the link, I'm just going to continue. So when we design a local assessment calendar, folks in my team, the local assessment team, work with various stakeholders and partners, especially the curriculum team, to kind of come up with a calendar that meets the 2.2%, but also meets the needs of all of our stakeholders. And so when we're giving an assessment that we procure, such as the iReady or the COGAT, there are specific windows that are set nationally that we have to adhere to if we want to get national norms. It doesn't make sense if we're giving an assessment, at one point of the year, and in other districts across the nation, it's being given at another time of year for comparison's sake, right? And so it's important. Now, these windows are generally pretty broad, and they tell us, you can, within this large national window, you can administer the assessment for, say, 4 weeks or so. Now, we want to be pretty narrow, too, because, again, if we're going to compare students or we're going to compare schools and classrooms, if they're giving it at different times a year, then the data just aren't as precise as we need it to be. So those are some of the challenges that we have here. And you can see that we break it down by pre-K, kindergarten through first grade, second grade, and then third through fifth grade. We address ELA and math. You see the COGAT there for screening for gifted and talented education. And then we also have, again, curriculum-specific assessments that are designed internally.
It's a lot of time and effort to go into trying to figure out when you can do these, because there's also all the events and all the other things happening in a school on a day-to-day basis.
That's right.
As well, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So that concludes our part of the presentation for the District Committee on Assessment. Microphone. If board members have any questions or comments.
Got to turn that on.
Yeah, so I mean, really, my real question is, you had mentioned that there are some of the local assessments that we are creating here in-house versus some that I guess we're purchasing. Is there any way that we could do more in-house to where we didn't have to outsource our assessments to outside vendors? Is there anything we could do to eliminate that?
One of the advantages of using an outside assessment is it gives us national norms. And so, especially around the pandemic, it became important for us to say, how well are our kids comparing to students across the state and then also nationally, especially in terms of reading and math? And so that's why we went with those particular assessments. iReady. DIBELS is used nationally to give us really strong information about whether or not kids are learning foundational reading skills. And that's actually, although DIBELS itself is not mandated, we are required by law, according to Senate Bill 734, the Struggling Readers Act, to screen kids several times a year and to provide additional support or intervention for kids who are not meeting the different benchmarks. So Some of it is dictated by law, and then some of it is just kind of a desire to see how our students are comparing nationally. But the local assessments really help us to understand how well kids are learning our specific curriculum.
So then a follow-up to that, these national vendors that's providing some of these assessments, without purchasing the assessment, so meaning if we created a local exam ourselves to assess, a student's readiness in a particular subject, could we gain that access to that data that is already being gathered if we had a similar comparative test locally versus actually purchasing it? Would we be able to gain access to that data? Is that available?
I'm not sure I completely understand your question.
Okay, so let's just go with give me an example of one of these vendors we're using for assessment.
So we use the iReady assessment. It's an online testing platform for reading and math.
Okay, great. So let's just use that as the example. So if you were to not purchase iReady and we were to create some type of internal local assessment for assessing reading readiness, what have you, the data that is gathered from other schools across the country through iReady, would we be able to see that without having that subscription to the assessments? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, so, I just came from a meeting with iReady on our end of the year reading data. I had to leave it early, so I haven't seen all of it. So I don't know in what way they publish that nationally. We have access because we obviously are an iReady user. So I could look into that. I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Before COVID, we did not have 1-to-1 device ratio in elementary school, correct? I'm just thinking about the impact. How do we handle testing then prior to adding that? Is there more assessments now that this created a challenge, or we just kind of did better and it was easier? You know what I mean? What is the,
Probably a combination of both. There are certainly more digital assessments now than there were in 2018 prior to the pandemic. When Chromebooks were first rolled out to our schools, the norm was carts and sharing, and schools figured it out. Now we do have many more online assessments. The K-2 example, the way that we do DIBELS now with iReady, with the KRA now coming digital, this is a new landscape, and so that's part of what's layered on to the challenges for schools in balancing all the devices and spreading them out when it comes on these kind of major testing windows.
one other follow-up to that. There's just been a lot of data and talk recently about the lack, how writing notes is better for learning than reading on a screen and all these kinds of things, and it seems to be kind of growing. Is there an impact to our testing for having it be digital versus like a paper test? Is there something about that that could be impacting scores? Is there something we should consider with that?
Well, I can tell you with the state testing, for example, there's definitely some training that needs to go into how to take the assessment itself. Let me give you an example. The Algebra 1 assessment this year, we had some red flags raised by schools. We had students who weren't able to progress in the exam. There are questions that have multiple parts, and a student can't progress unless they answer all of the parts. That seems pretty straightforward. If there's a part A and B, you answer both parts and then you can move on. But then there are also questions where it says select all that apply, right? And there could be 5 different answers, and you maybe have to select 3 of them. Well, in a couple of cases, we had students select 2 of the answers, and they couldn't figure out why they couldn't progress because it kept telling them to answer all parts of the questions. The students thought, well, I did answer all the parts of the questions, right? And so that's an example of how, us not knowing, we didn't know because the state didn't tell us. The pop-up window direction, in my opinion, was misleading because the student did answer all the parts. They just didn't select all the responses that were appropriate. So, yeah, I think there are definitely some challenges, especially with state testing, and that's a point that I really tried to make pretty vigorously in my MCAT presentation earlier this spring.
I also wanted to point out, Ms. Brennan, the committee said exactly what you said. That first bullet is where are our opportunities to do more paper pencil, which we in our local assessments have more control over. So as we think about how we want to measure writing, for example, as we think about how students might engage paper pencil with a math assessment, our local assessments, feedback from the committee told us we need to continue to have a balance between the digital and working with paper pencil.
Well, Dr. Vedder's comment made me think about that, because one way I always did standardized testing back in the day when I took standardized testing, was I would go through and answer the questions that I was good with and I was comfortable with, and then come back to the ones that annoyed me and that I had a problem with, and sometimes those other questions would jog your memory or whatever, and it would put you in a great frame of mind to answer the other ones. But if some of these assessments are forcing kids to largely perhaps choose a wrong answer or spin wheels for more time, than they would normally do. Like, I used to just go through them, and if I didn't know it, I'd skip it. And then I'd go and answer the things that I knew. Then I'd come back and systematically kind of work through the other ones. And so I just wonder too if that is potentially impacting, our students and their opinions about the test, the stress levels, some of that other kind of stuff too.
And if I may, I do like the idea of that we're looking at doing more paper testing, because that's also going to give us that sort of control in a sense of how are our kids doing, because it's not just the digital learning and how can we spit that information out in a digital format, but especially when we're talking about history and the social sciences and ELA, being able to write out those thoughts in a cohesive and comprehensive way that makes sense, and it's written out legibly is a very different sort of format than trying to do it, type in it, whatever else. And I mean, I've taken the NCLEX. The NCLEX is full. It's the nursing exam that you have to take to be licensed as a nurse. And it is full of select all that apply and different kinds of questions, accelerated. You either finish it in 75 or you finish it in about, I think it's like 210. It's the highest it goes. I finished mine in 75. But yeah, it's a skill. Testing is a skill, and it's going to be different digitally than it on a paper. And I did the same thing you would do. I would go to the questions that made them, I couldn't do that on the NCLEX, but on other exams I could do that. And that seems to be a flaw of the digital testing format in general, to force you to go number 2 to number 3 to number 4. But that select all apply that student ran into, that shouldn't have happened. There's plenty of platforms that get that right, so they shouldn't have had that trouble with that one, for sure. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to be able to see more of the paper testing. I also was curious how much of that, we do have more digital tests and everything being on a computer, and we've been, fussing around with the one-to-one at that, K through 2 level, yet teachers have to somehow get those Chromebooks in the kids' hands to do the iReady, to do the DIBELS, and we have the 2.2% of that instructional time and the setup time. That's got to be kind of difficult, right? With the challenge, I guess I just speak a little bit about the challenge of trying to get that right, get under that 2.2 instructional time that's taken out for the testing and for the setup of the testing, just those 2 things, and what else
So it's the actual testing itself, because
Right.
it's student learning time. Now, we also hear from teachers the importance of making sure we're aware of how much setup time, impacts their schedule in terms of their planning and so on.
Yeah, that's a challenge.
And we know that certain grade levels have more impact than others. So 5th grade, for example, is where the science state assessment comes in, MISA.
Oh, yeah.
8th grade, for example, there's now an 8th grade social studies assessment that comes in. This is all state mandated. So certain grade levels really approach that 2%, 2.2%. Others well below.
Okay. No, that's good to know. Thank you so much. And then I had another question and it left my brain.
Real quick, what are you noticing with the digital assessments and their impact on special education students? Because one of the big things is obviously whether it's the blue light from the screen, whether it's visual spatial issues, whatever it is, a lot of students might have accommodations to be able to write on the test or write on paper. Obviously, that's not the case in digital. What are we doing to try to make sure that those students are receiving, A, the accommodations that they need in order to be successful in those assessments, and B, is there anything different that we could be doing to ensure that maybe if the digital platform isn't the proper format for that student, that we're ensuring that that student has the proper accommodations?
Yeah, so one of the nice things about the digital platforms is they provide us, again, nationally normed data on where students are. So in terms of special education, we talk about that we're a multiple measures system, right? And so we try and triangulate data based on a couple of different assessments to figure out where kids are. And so having this national data without supports, honestly, to kind of see where truly kids are is important when we're evaluating how well we're doing with a special education student, whether or not they need more supports or less. So in that particular case, we don't typically provide supports. Now, with state testing, there are absolutely built-in supports into the platforms.
It's sort of double-edged because the technology has gotten pretty sophisticated where it does can provide a great deal of assistive technology to some students who can benefit from it, whether it's reading it aloud or whether it's dictating into it. Different accessibility features that are visual are often built in, but that doesn't work for every student, which is why there are other accommodations, such as students being able to have the paper pencil option or somebody to read to them, those kinds of things. So on one hand, the technology can help. On the other hand, there may be barriers for other students. It's also important to point out that the vendors now have much of a higher standard based on some accessibility laws and regulations that are in place in Maryland. So to even come into a public school district, the threshold is very, very high about the accessibility features that must be included.
I was going to add that piece relative to the standards and expectations for technology for our differing learners, students with disabilities. But if there are technology needs beyond what the school can provide, then we have an augmentative communication and technology team that the school can access to make sure that they are accommodating if there are blue light issues or other changes or accommodations that need to be made for a student to effectively use technology.
Excellent, thank you.
Just remember that last question. Is there any sort of, if we didn't meet that 2.2 or 2.3% threshold for some reason, what could happen as a result of that? Any loss of funding? Thought I'd ask.
The first thing that happens is collaboration with the Teacher Association, FCTA. So the legislation calls for being in agreement, not only with the community, but with our Teacher Association. So if we collaboratively said, in this grade level, we need to go to 2.3 or 2.4%, as long as the committee endorses that, we report to you as the board, and our Teacher Association is on board with that, it can't go above the threshold. But again, we know the impact on instructional time, so our goal is really to keep there.
All right, thank you so much. Any other questions? All right. And we're ready for that.
Okay, so next will be the Frederick County Virtual School and the remote virtual program. I will pull up the slides as the team gets settled. Okay.
It's still early, it doesn't matter anyway, right?
This is how we get ready for the evening, right? Get all the kinks.
Mary, I appreciate you, or whoever is putting up the slides.
Mr. Murphy, do I need the clicker? Yes, that'll work. Left click.
Technical term, the clicker.
Yeah.
Coming from the virtual school.
So I will begin, Sonia, Ms. Brennan, and Mr. Black, Dr. Harris, Dr. Vetter, and Mr. Murphy. Thank you so much. We appreciate this chance to present an overview of the Frederick County Virtual School and the middle school RVP, soon to be grades 4 through 8 RVP. I'm here this morning with Mr. Watson and Mr. Hoover Beat, who are both the administrators of our virtual programming in school. I want to take this moment to recognize and appreciate these two leaders and the work they do to ensure that we have the best virtual programming in the state. And I really appreciate them and really honor them because the work they do is cutting edge. And so I really appreciate them. And we're really lucky to have you in the positions you hold. In addition, I want to thank the board members, and I also want to thank Dr. Dyson for the support of the virtual learning programs as we move forward. So appreciate that very much. In today's presentation, we have the two stars who will take over here in a minute, but we want to look at the outcomes, and we want to review current enrollment and participation trends in the RVP. We want to share with you the instructional models, and there's some questions in public comment about the model, and we're going to address that. And then we are going to highlight the plans as we move forward to consolidate and continue to find operational efficiencies. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Watson.
Good morning. So first slide there, you can see enrollment trends going back to 2022. Specifically chose that year because that's when we first started implementing the elementary and middle school remote virtual programs. High school, we had some established programs prior to that, but you can see the enrollment trends for the past 4 years, as well as what we're projecting for next year based on our application process that we had this spring. So starting with Frederick County Virtual School, we've been offering comprehensive online courses since 2012. We were actually offering online courses before that, but we were going by a different name. We were called Flexible Evening High School. So that was the year that we transitioned to Frederick County Virtual School. We've always believed in a blended model where we combine synchronous learning opportunities with asynchronous. There was a time where we actually brought students in person into a building when our office was out of TJ Middle School, so we would bring kids in the evening to get access to their instructor, meet with other students. But as technology has advanced, we transitioned to Google Meets that provides more access to students so that they're not having to travel to meet in person with their students or the staff. We also provide support from dedicated FCVS instructors as well as FCPS instructors because we do hire adjunct teachers for some of our supplemental programs, but they're all FCPS certified teachers. Continuing with that instructional model for all of our programs, some of the students who access full-time and part-time are looking for flexible learning options because their personal pathway for their education is going different routes, maybe Career and Technology Center, maybe an IB program. And so when you enroll in programs like that, it creates some scheduling conflicts. So we've been able to support students who are looking for those alternative pathways, as well as students who want to just do online for their primary learning. That's their full-time students, which you heard from some of our families today. What I'm proud of is that you're just finishing up your graduation round, right? Busy week. So 30% of the students that you saw walk across stages during our graduation ceremonies have taken at least one high school course with FCVS. So it shows you kind of the systemic impact that we've been having for many years. We transition and talk about our full-time students. They're taking all of their courses through FCVS. The instructional model includes 2 synchronous days of instruction for each course that they're enrolled in, combined with asynchronous opportunities so that they can have flexibility in their schedule, but also additional support for students. They do have access to their teachers on a daily basis, so we do recognize some students might need more support than those 2 synchronous sessions per week, and so we want to provide opportunities for students to get access to their teachers. All of our students do continue to be enrolled in their home school, or their geo-identified school, I think is what we're calling them now. So they can participate in extracurricular activities, and we don't have a large percentage of students who do that, but we have students who do participate in athletics, some drama productions, even some unified sports and clubs back at their home schools. So that's been a nice connection, and that's actually an improvement that came out of the pandemic, is making sure students stay tied to their home school to have access to those opportunities, because we're not able to provide every single opportunity that a comprehensive high school could. When you look at our supplemental programs, this is the programs that have been kind of our bread and butter for a long time. It allows any student in Frederick County High School to take an online course. So it allows them to still attend their home school during the school day, but also have flexible opportunities to take additional courses that they might need for a variety of reasons, like we talked about when we looked at that slide of who we serve. I'm proud to say that every year we serve approximately 2,300 students just in our supplemental programs. The next slide shows you a breakdown of those different programs with estimates from annual enrollment based on last year and completion rates based on last year. I am proud to say that we're probably going to exceed that total amount this school year because our virtual summer session, that last one there, we're already up to 850 students. That starts in a week here, so we'll actually have probably close to 1,000 students continuing their education through the summer. And it's beyond just credit recovery. There are students who want to get ahead. They want to get some scheduling conflicts out of the way, so they enroll in a summer class to continue their learning experience. And we hire about 70 different staff members to work with students over the summer and make sure they have the support that they need to be successful in their courses. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hoover Beat. He's going to talk a little bit more about the middle school program.
So our middle school instructional program is a comprehensive model where we do blend in the live and synchronous instruction along with some asynchronous coursework. With that, we do have each student is assigned, of course, all their teachers in their courses, but also assigned one teacher for their advisory period where they get extra support from that teacher that they see 2 or 3 days a week. We also serve students that mainly want the online instruction or they want a modified schedule, which is what I'm going into the next slide. So we do a block A-day, B-day schedule. So sometimes they have to see their teachers 3 days a week or sometimes 2 days a week, just depends upon what the week is like. But they do see all their core and elective courses within the week. Through that, we do have the asynchronous work, so we have some time built into the day where they have some asynchronous time to work on stuff, in addition to signing up with teachers for power blocks, which is our tutoring time, in addition to office hours that each teacher holds during the day too. As Mr. Watson was saying, our students are still enrolled in their home school, so they do have those opportunities to participate in some extracurricular activities. This year I had quite a few kids participate in their theater productions back at their home schools or some of the other clubs and activities after school too. I'm lucky and fortunate to offer a supplemental program too, where I support through one of my staff members 4 middle schools in teaching French 1 because they cannot offer it at their home schools because they didn't have a high enough enrollment or the staffing to do that. So I do have one teacher doing that. And for the past couple of years, she's been averaging servicing 50 students, but we're looking at the projection numbers for next year and it's increasing to about 65. So I'm very pleased that we are still able to offer that. Move forward. Through our middle school program, we do get to participate in a lot of activities that are very similar to the in-school buildings. As you can see, there's a whole list here that ranges from the Young Authors Contest to the Alex Pie Challenges. We do offer some reading stuff, but we had the opportunity to participate in some field trips this past year. Our 6th graders did go to outdoor school, and we're going to continue with that, in addition to a walking tour of downtown Frederick. But when the students did not want to go in person, we'd have a virtual option for them too that aligns to the exact same thing the kids were doing in person. But you can see all those various things that we did.
So then it comes back to me, and this visual hopefully underscores the fact that one of our efficiencies is to move the RVP under the Frederick County Virtual School. And so moving forward, as Dr. Dyson announced, we are pleased to announce that next year the remote virtual program will be consolidated under the Frederick Virtual School umbrella and the name school. This consolidation marks a significant step forward in the ongoing efforts to improve operational efficiency. It also enables RVP to be formally recognized as part of a school for state reporting purposes. The next slide. So recognizing the ongoing constraints of our budget and our commitment to families to access high-quality virtual learning, we always are actively exploring ways to optimize staff and enhance operational efficiency. In recent years, we made strategic staffing reductions at the elementary and middle school levels, while, as you've heard, maintaining a strong and effective educational experience for our students. Looking ahead to the upcoming school year, we're pleased to bring back 4th and 5th grade. We believe these grades represent an appropriate developmental stage for students to engage successfully in virtual environment. While FCPS in the past has offered virtual learning across all elementary grade levels, the introduction of new state literacy requirements for grades K through 3 has reinforced our belief that the virtual learning is not the most effective model for students who are still building foundational reading skills and learning how to engage in formal schooling. As part of our ongoing efforts to increase efficiency, we're moving forward with the consolidation of the remote virtual program under the Frederick County Virtual School. The benefits in the consolidation are listed here. And next year when we come back, because we usually come annually to this committee, we'll be excited to share our progress in the consolidation. We do anticipate it will probably take this school year for us to work out some of the concerns or issues, and I do believe we will continue to find some efficiencies. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Mr. Watson.
Yep. So here you can see, this is our most formal data that we have when we collect from families regarding our climate survey. You can see some of the different categories. I think Ms. Monier, you had sent some questions and we responded to comparing us to the rest of the county. So while there might be some areas that are a little bit lower than others, it actually fares pretty well to the rest of our high schools and middle schools. But we use this data to try to drive some of the decision making for future school years, along with some informal feedback that we get from families and students as well. And then that drives our school improvement plan process. So if you go to the next slide, Derek, based on some of this feedback and from that survey and from our families, we're looking to expand high school course offerings. That's been some of the feedback that we received from families who choose to leave virtual programming and go back to their home school has consistently been that they don't have access to additional courses, whether that be advanced placement courses, more elective types courses. So we're trying to continue to broaden the course offerings that we have for students so they could get those virtually just as well as they could get those in person. Same thing with the middle school program, trying to expand elective options because his A/B day schedule does limit some of those offerings. Our climate, we're always trying to improve. Sometimes students choose virtual for the wrong reason. And so we're always trying to engage students, make sure they're attending the synchronous sessions, engaging in coursework during asynchronous time. And then something I'm excited that we're expanding to the middle school, because we started this year at the high school level, is this No Place for Hate, which I think you're familiar. So we had a group of 3 student leaders who led that initiative at the high school, and so it'll be great to see that expand to the middle school and provide some cohesion too, and some leadership for our students to participate in that. And then last one is, we have students come to us for a lot of different reasons. So it's really trying to understand those reasons and provide the supports in place so that they can be successful in this environment, and so that you can continue to hear public testimony about the great job that our teachers are doing. And while I think Derek and I both appreciate the feedback that we get, it's really a testament to the teachers who are spending that time to really get to know students, to make those phone calls, to send postcards, and to make students still feel connected in an environment that's not always easy to feel connected in. So those are the things that are kind of driving us. We do have separate school improvement plans because our models are slightly different. We have separate leadership teams. So that's something that I think, as Mr. Saunders mentioned, we'll see, is that feasible to continue doing? Is there some benefits to consolidating the leadership team? So those are some of the things we'll be working on once the school year ends and to prepare for next school year.
An example of Heather Ridge has a high school program and a middle school program, but they have 2 different leadership teams too. So it may stay the same. And before we take questions and discussion, I know we have a great presentation from our media folks, but I saw a couple of people back there in the back who are members of the Frederick County Virtual School. Will you please stand and be recognized?
Good morning.
Awesome. And then with the parents who are here to support, please stand and be recognized. Thank you so much. We don't usually get public comment and audience. So thank you so much. We appreciate the support, and we're open for questions.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you about the Heather Ridge connection, because I remember going over there, and there are students that are able to take the virtual classes. They also have the middle school and the high school. And so there's maybe 2 different leadership teams. That doesn't mean you're not able to collaborate and try and find best practices and things to help solve challenges that you have going forward, right? So it's something that you're still going to work on. I remember seeing that AB schedule, and there was the beginning of the day up until 1:15, I think it is, and then it goes in roughly,
Yes.
right? And then it goes to a tutoring block. It's like, wow, there's a lot of students. We're also getting emails from students in a brick and mortar school saying, I wish we had our step block back, or that time that they would normally have for flex time, study time, tutoring, what have you. And so, but I guess part of that challenge of keeping that might be whether or not like different course offerings that might be able to come available, correct? And some of the scheduling challenges.
Yes, it is part of some of the scheduling challenges, but I will say that our power blocks have been utilized. We've seen a major improvement throughout the year. So in term 3, just alone, we had 3,600 times students were signed up for the power blocks in the afternoons just to get that extra support that they needed. So we did see great improvement there.
And I would just like to add, and Dr. Vetter can probably jump in here because he was the first principal of the middle school virtual program, but when we were working together, originally the virtual program coming out of COVID was 7 periods. And what we realized, the fatigue from the screen, and it just wasn't getting the bang for the buck that we needed, and kids' voice told us we need more opportunities to kind of just absorb some of this and not as much screen time. And I think that's where the power block came from. I don't know if you want to address that, because that's really the history of it. And while courses can still be added, I think the model needs to reflect the delivery of instruction that's being given. And I think we really believe that it does support kids not getting too much. I mean, obviously screen time is an important issue for all of us, but it balances, I think, to a great degree. Did you want to add anything? Okay.
And that reflection to process learning and is something that even our brick and mortar students need to be able to have as well, right? Yeah.
What are some of the courses, I'm sorry,
No,
I
go
jumped in
ahead.
ahead
That's
of
all
you.
right, go ahead.
What are some of the courses that you see as the most interest being generated around as far as adding to the remote virtual program?
Yeah, great question. Advanced placement courses and higher level math courses. Those are where we're seeing a greater demand for students, and typically the reason why they might transition back to their home schools. So I am excited with our transition to our schedule. We are having about an 11% increase in the course offerings for next year. So we are adding AP options not only for our full-time students, but we're adding AP options for our supplemental programs so that students at high schools can also take them that way. Some high schools might get a low enrollment for an AP course, so they're not able to offer it based on their staffing, and that's when an opportunity comes to let them access it virtually. And I think that aligns well with the blueprint and what's coming for AP pathways for students when they start to personalize once they get to their junior year. So that's been a systemic goal, working with the advanced academics team and the curriculum offices to try to increase our AP options, as well as more dual enrollment options virtually for our full-time students as well, so that they can get a similar experience and offerings that our traditional students do as well.
And you mentioned electives. Obviously, there's certain electives that you'll never be able to put on a screen.
Yeah, small engine repair is not.
Ag mechanics isn't going on the screen. But what are some of the electives that you have heard that we could possibly put into the virtual program that would actually maybe work with that? Ed, what are some of those?
So I think in the fine arts, we're always trying to work to, and we're actually designing an art and drawing and painting course to add to our digital photo. We have an American pop music course as well. I think CTE is always a popular area, or even some business management courses as well. We do have, for a couple of years now, we've had a business completer that students could take virtually, even if they wanted to do it supplemental from one of their other high schools. And then a lot of the social studies courses that we have in our traditional schools, elective options. For example, the Black African American Studies course is another course that's not always offered at every high school, but then we can offer it and pull students from all 10 buildings to justify running it. So I think we're trying to listen to the demands of our full-time students and what they're looking for to prepare them for after high school, but also the systemic needs of how we can partner to help schools who are struggling with some, as you know, class sizes and being able to offer certain courses. We're never going to be able to offer the comprehensive course load that a traditional school is, but we're trying to increase those options so that students have choice.
Absolutely. And then one more question. Are you finding that your students in the virtual program are having struggles if, say, they want to go to the Career and Technology Center or they want to go participate in an activity at their home school? Are you seeing any struggles there with the students and being able to reacclimate to being in person?
No, it's fun. No, I do not. And we do. This year we started doing exit surveys with some students who are choosing to go back, and it's been interesting to kind of read through those responses. And some of it's just, hey, I've been online since COVID. I want to go try what it's like to be at our high school. So I'm glad that we have those, like, with that transition is able to happen. And then the good thing is if it doesn't work out, if they're struggling, they have options to come back to us if needed, or even still stay at their home school but access virtual options in other ways. As far as CTC, AFA, our change in our schedule this year has actually promoted that. It's given more access to those programs. And our schedule now aligns with all of our high school schedules, so it would make an easy transition for students if they were going back and forth. So I think we've actually increased the access and availability to some of those programs. Now, like the IB program, you have to enroll in Urbana. But if we were looking at, creative ways, I think they do offer online IB courses out there. They do offer CTC related online courses. So like there are options for those if we want to look to expand and broaden some of the things that we're doing in our county. But I don't see students struggling too much with that transition because usually it's by choice. They're choosing to go back for a specific reason. And sometimes we have a lot of students who will do virtual at the middle school, and then the 8th grader, that's all they wanted it for. Then they decide, for high school, I want the comprehensive high school experience. I want to be going to homecoming and participating in like athletic events on a weekly basis. And not that our full-time students can't do that, because they can. They can go to the homecoming dance. But I think they want that high school experience. So I think the transition and the ability to go back and forth is kind of a benefit that we offer.
Excellent, thank you. And I just want to add, I think I'm probably in conversation with these gentlemen more than once a week sometimes, but the customization that we're able to do through this programming, like when there's a kid that would follow their schedule as an anomaly, it's amazing the creativity in which we can, try to fit the circle into the square peg, so to speak, if that's what's necessary, especially around graduation time. Like if kids have fallen behind, there's opportunities for us to, in their senior year or junior year, get them ready for graduation, which is awesome. So I hat off to both of you for that flexibility.
So just going back to the time model, and I agree with you about not having the 7 periods. I think that's exhausting. And I think one thing we didn't really realize is how much time is, I don't mean to imply negatively, but kind of wasted when you have, 30 kids in a classroom and you're trying to get them together. That's we don't have that when it's just everybody's already sitting in a nice, quiet place. So I'm glad that you guys have adjusted to that model, because when my kids were doing COVID, they were, it was too much all day, like a regular school day. And even then, they didn't need that time, so they ended up with a lot of class time. So I'm glad you guys have done that. I want to go back to the issue, like we were saying about putting the RVP under FCVS. So FCVS already had a school code, right? So we are basically RVP is now kind of going to be the middle and elementary school option of the Frederick County Virtual School. I mean, we might keep it separate but that's essentially how it's going to work.
And I see FCVS now, and probably a visual, now that I think about it, is probably not the best one. The FCVS probably should be the umbrella, and then the programs that you offer underneath that are part of the school, just like any other school has a program. So if I was to do it again, I would probably make the umbrella labeled FCVS, so you can kind of think about that. And then if you want to address that, there's different things that you have the supplemental program, you have the full-time program, we have the 4 through 8 program next year, so there's programs that are going to fall under
our code, our school.
That is correct.
Right, okay,
and
great.
then Mr. Hoover Beat said, and I'm not really sure the details on this, he shared that school students would still be, or this year, are still part of their homeschool. Part of the dating, Dr. Vetter helped me, but I think this is true. Next year, students will still have access to their homeschool, but they'll be coded to the virtual school because of reporting data. Is that accurate? That's my understanding. No, okay, so, okay.
Yeah, I mean, for the sake of accountability purposes, the results still go back to the home schools. There are different ways in which we, there are different reports where we identify students with the school and with their home school, or their geo-identified school, as we call it now. We're able to use geo-identification to identify what neighborhood they're living in and what school they would go to, because sometimes they may not have actually gone to that school that we were traditionally calling a home school. So for accountability purposes, the results will still go back to geo-identified school.
And my only point was, regardless of what the school coding was, they still have access to their original school to participate in the activities we're talking about. So even if that would change, they still have access to their home school. So the drama programs and other things that they can go back and participate in.
Okay, great. And then just to follow up, because it was a public comment and I was concerned about this when we heard about it too, can you talk a little bit more about how, with reducing the synchronous learning at the high school classes, how we really expect to moderate that for the kids who maybe needed a little more touch points?
Yeah, I think that transition was really to try to better align with all of the programs that we are offering and hearing the feedback from families who wanted flexibility in their schedule. The other challenge with having daily synchronous at the high school level is it limits the course offerings that you can provide, because then each teacher is tied to a specific schedule. And so what we were challenged with is we couldn't offer multiple sections and we couldn't offer multiple additional courses. So one of the reasons for the change was to also provide more course options. Because at one time we would have just like a singleton, which what that means is basically like we're only running one section of English 10 in the first semester. And so that really kind of cripples a student's schedule if that's only offered then. Then they're tied to that block and they're limited to some other course offerings. So expanding that option and giving kids more flexibility is allowing us to add more course options so they can get some of their needs. But it also goes back to, like Mr. Saunders referenced when the middle school remote virtual program started. Students don't want to be in a Google Meet for 8 hours a day, right? Especially high school students. And so I think some of the data that we saw with that model, and you saw it on that first slide there, is we saw a decline in enrollment over time. Now there's some other factors that may lead to that, but as we started to get feedback from students, provide more flexible options, but also that schedule allows them now access to their teacher every single day if they need it. So even if you don't have a synchronous session on a Wednesday, but you need support from your teacher for academic reasons, you want to touch base with them. I mean, we have a lot of students who just go and socialize too with their teacher, or for extension opportunities or for small group things. There's now daily access to their teacher, which in our other schedule wouldn't have allowed that because the teachers were tied to teaching during those certain time frames. So trying to find a balance for all of our students, like how much structure do we provide with how much flexibility, but also the support that might be needed for some students who do maybe struggle with that. I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind, especially as Derek and I work together and students transition from middle school to high school, is how do we better prepare them? Because the transition from middle school to high school is already a big step, right? Like even for our traditional students. So it's working together to better onboard students, prepare them for that model. But like Mr. Hoover-Bead said, their students aren't meeting synchronously every day with the same class because of their A-B schedule. So our twice a week isn't too far removed from that. And it's also a model that works for all of our dual enrollment courses across the county, that they're only meeting synchronously twice a week. So we wanted to try to implement a model that was effective but also provided flexibility and support. So I think that's the key for us, is then working with students to make sure they're getting that support, advocating for the support, or when teachers are requesting them, they're actually attending the support.
I wonder too, just maybe the more synchronous or trying to maybe gear a little bit that to like our ninth graders versus, let them get in, get their feet wet a little bit more. And then, because most, by the time a lot of our kids are taking virtual, my son took classes at FCC, he went to school twice a week. That was it. And the whole rest of the time there was no connection. That was from junior year on. So I could, you know, a lot of these kids are really ready to start doing that a little later. Maybe it's just that first year, that 9th grade year, where it's kind of, you know, seems like it'll be a little bit more of a challenge, and just making sure that we're getting in with the kids and that sort of thing.
Yeah, Ms. Brennan, you bring up a good point. This year, we actually had synchronous meets like every day for the first 3 to 5 days to like help with that transition. So we haven't talked yet about what that might look like next school year, but we recognize that too. It's really those first couple of days, but I think we're working on some things where how can we better onboard students before the first day of school too. So that's one of our goals, one of our school improvement plan goals probably for next year will have to do with onboarding students and make sure they feel supported.
And just to add a piece real quick, I think the other thing is we do listen to student voice. I think you've heard this whole presentation, how we evolve. I think you're going to do the same thing. You know, we're going to review, keep track as we go through the year, collect data, and we are a continuous improvement school system. So we will be monitoring this new approach and seeing the benefit of having more options and having less synchronous time outweighs less options and more synchronous time. I mean, those are the balances in this time constraint and budget constraint period. We're trying to strike a balance.
I do think a lot of kids, when they adjust to it, will be fine with it, particularly with the being able to talk to the teachers a lot, you know, getting that support and signing up for regular time that can, you know, mentally teach themselves that that's class time or whatever. You know, if you can sign up with your teacher from, you know, 12 to 12:30 or 12:15, you know, that might just be enough of a check-in. Another thing, which is not really up to you guys, I don't think, but I'm looking at these numbers and then knowing what talking to the community, I feel like we're not utilizing what you guys are offering enough. And as a parent of a very recent graduate, my son graduated this year, I barely knew much about this as a parent until I started really being involved for, you know, looking towards school board activities. And so I feel like there's a big market that we're not hitting. And how do we plan to reach out to that?
So I'll start, and I think that was a question when we met with the RVP parents in the spring or late winter around like how are we advertising. So we really did do a push this year, and I'll share, you know, a little bit about the application process, et cetera, but we're open to feedback and suggestions. It is labeled in the website, and it's under the school, so people can see there. We know the website is only visited, you know, by people who are truly looking for something, so sometimes that's limited. We put it out in, you know, our messaging system, but it is a great program, and I do feel like, you know, but it's a niche program, you know what I mean? So it's not for everybody, but I think it's for those kids that it's serving, it's really amazing. And there may be more kids that could benefit. So I'll throw it to Derek and then to Mr. Watson.
So yes, so when we met with parents in the winter time, Mr. Watson and I did get together with Mr. Saunders to discuss how can we really implement a lot of this stuff, and we did do a major push this year. But one of the things I did notice is there are misconceptions of what middle school RVP is and how we roll through things, especially when I was administrator at different buildings. So I am actually in the process for the middle school piece and the elementary pieces. What are we? So my leadership team is putting together a presentation, a video that's going to capture all these pieces that will go out to my families that are coming in that we can use also in the future about what are our expectations, what happens in a regular school day and all that, because there are those. I will say there was a lot more phone calls that I was receiving this year, especially around the January, February timeline, where I would spend days talking to parents about what are we and going through those things. So I do see there was an uptick in that. I will say those are my projected numbers, but I did have over 200 applications come in. And after sitting down with parents, they really got a feel for it and either decided, yes, 100%, or no, this might not be the best thing, but I will look at it for another year with my child because I want to see how they do in 6th grade.
Yeah, so I've been at the virtual school now for 12 years, and so it's a tricky question because I've wrestled with this too and thinking about how we market the work that we do. And like Derek just stated, like even with our full-time application, we get a lot of applicants, but they don't always all then accept or come to us, either due to misconceptions or the timing that they're kind of the mindset that they're in, or what might be going on at their home school that makes them think about the application but then not follow through with it. Some of the things that we've done over the years to try to promote our programs at the high school level is we do meet with high school counseling staff twice a year, usually in the fall virtually and then in person in the spring. My staff, we go to every high school registration night. That's usually in January, and we set up a table to, just like CTC, dual enrollment, we set up a table and we try to get out there and let people see us and know that we're an option for students. I've also attended the Life After Middle School event that they had at Thurmont Middle School, so I've presented there for the past couple of years. And then we've used, our public affairs department to try to market some things. So systemically, we send out communication when we do the application process. So all of our stakeholders are receiving that. When we do our summer session enrollments, like we do a systemic communication that goes out to all of our stakeholders. And then we also, when we have our school year supplemental programs, a systemic communication that goes out to all stakeholders. So, and then a lot of times you might see this, but then schools will send out their own individual communication, kind of broadcasting that. So beyond those methods, I don't know. Like, it's hard to know what the demand really is. But I think it's something that we got to continuously kind of evaluate, reflect on how can we better get out there. I know you meet with middle school principals all the time to share those options. We have principal meetings, so I think the school building staff are definitely aware of it, and counselors are kind of our first, they're the first line for students who are looking for different options. We also work with PPW so that they know that for students that they might deal with. So I think it's something we have to continue to reflect on and maybe partner with public affairs to see are there other ways that we could better promote it. But that's been kind of a challenge for us for a long time now too.
Yeah, I knew about it as a parent from the summer stuff largely, and it was like, oh, if you needed this class but you couldn't get it, and it's come up a little bit for scheduling, in high school and things like that, like, oh, you could take this then, or you could do this, but particularly more so, one, I didn't know, to be honest with you, that you could go virtual high school until, really got into the board stuff, but that you could go virtual high school the whole time. I largely thought as a parent initially several years ago that it was credit recovery, summer school, those kind, missing a class because of CTC or whatever, that kind of stuff. So, I would be great for more people to know that you can actually just go to high school. And I know that you guys know this, it's just hard. And the other thing too is I think that, and I've said to parents when they come up and they say, my child's really struggling, they're being bullied, they're being, and all these other things. And I'll say, we have virtual high school, we have the RVP, sometimes you just need to be completely disconnected. And lots of times they'll come back and they'll say, well, but they play soccer, well, they do this. And it's like, I don't think even in the community that a lot of people know that you can still try out for your school's soccer team. You can still try out for baseball if that's what you want to do. You can still go to the 8th grade dance if you really wanted to do that kind of stuff. So, I hope that we get that expanded because I love the options and having the options, and virtual options are great. And so I think that that's fantastic, and I appreciate your work.
So one more question for you. Did you guys ever see any staff within the traditional brick and mortar building making any type of referrals for students or for families to apply to the RVP? I think that maybe there would be a little bit more applications coming in, actually probably quite a few more. If you maybe had folks actively in the brick and mortar schools that could maybe identify students that would benefit from the RVP. That's not saying you have to force them to go there, but I think if that option was given, especially, whether it's issues with special education, whether it's, behavioral, I think that there could be maybe some guidance that's put in place on brick and mortar staff to maybe make that recommendation. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we at the high school level we do have that, and for the past 2 years we've opened up a second application window in May based on our original numbers. And so we meet with, that spring meeting with counselors is actually in between both application periods. So when we're meeting with counselors, we're reminding them that, hey, there's gonna be a May window for students who might have missed the first application. Be thinking of students who might be on your radar, who this might benefit, and then we can capture some of those in that May application window. So we do the same thing with PPWs as they might be dealing with students who can't attend school for whatever reason. So we do have a process in place, and again, we're relying on those counselors to communicate that. As far as like individual teachers, probably not, because I don't think we're meeting with them. And I would say, Ms. Brennan, like you, I think there are teachers in our county who aren't aware of some of the virtual options that we have, just because like their day doesn't involve that. So it really would come from the counseling department or the PPWs who would be making those recommendations.
And I would just jump in. We wouldn't want teachers, but school counselors are very much appropriate thing, because I don't think it could be misinterpreted. The teacher said, "Hey, you can benefit from going somewhere else," and so so I think it really should be a thoughtful conversation. The other thing I would say that I think is important is that 11 to 14-year-olds still need to be supervised at home. So virtual learning isn't for everybody, because you have to be able to provide the support at home in order to access this program. And a lot of our parents are working and don't have the ability to have supervision at home. So that is what we see in middle school, the 11 to 14-year-olds, is that, oh, I love that, but I'm not home to supervise this. So those are some of the struggles I hear, is that there are people that might want that opportunity, but the reality of their particular circumstances don't allow it.
Okay. Yeah, I just think that there could maybe be some benefit if you've got some of your other, school folks that's brick and mortar, maybe special ed, behavior support. I think that there could maybe be some collaboration there to increase your numbers and offer that to folks that might benefit. Agreed.
And then I'm just going to wrap this up real quick. I just, to your point about how to get more of the word out there, I think you probably have a lot of kids in your program, virtual, FCVS and RVP, that are very talented with a camera and a phone and can actually do some work. And I feel like there's a capstone project, maybe some collaboration with AFA. There's some really great tools, and you have some really great kids. I think sometimes as adults, we want to come up with the solutions ourselves and involving the kids. And I know one of the questions I asked was that there was a student voices group, and you guys had talked about getting that student voices group and getting more of that together. Also, PTA, we should talk about a virtual PTA over here.
It's in the works already.
Yep. Yep. Yay, okay, good, we'll talk. And then, I just want to throw those out there. And then I did have one chance to work with for just a little bit of time, a virtual charter school from Florida that actually like a VR situation, which was fascinating for a lab sense, right? Because you got that lab piece. You could do, the frog was a very different experience, but also the human body, being able to see the heart, to pull, unravel the muscle, really pull out that circulatory system. And then when you think about automotive, I feel like some of that CTC, you can then bring in, because now you've got that VR piece, right? And then there's less time that has to be spent in a physical space for lab, and more time can be.
Great point.
Yeah, so.
And that's probably the next evolution, right?
Yeah, that's like some time, but
that's awesome.
One of the things I love about this program is I see a huge shift coming for public schools and schooling and education in general, and this is one of those places. So as much collaboration and feedback and work that everybody can do together now is going to set us up in a really good place for when some of these shifts start to really happen. So thank you guys so much for everything that you do. I appreciate you. And I know our time is about 11:22, so I want to make sure we have some time for the next presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dean, and the student community for being here. Okay, next up, as the team comes and we get our slides going, is media services and digital solutions.
I know that this will have some
We put these together, media services and library with digital solutions, because so many of our digital tools and instructional software kind of runs through the library. So these are together. So I'd like to introduce Jody Jankowski, our first year supervisor of media services, and Eric Haynes, our supervisor of innovative learning. And what we're going to do here, Mary, if you could go to the next slide, please, or if you could click Eric. We are going to start with Ms. Jankowski on just some updates in the media and library world, as well as number 2, things that are happening this year, which, as you probably know, includes a recent publication of a new regulation that governs library book selection. And then Mr. Haynes will round it out with some work happening with our digital tools. So I'm going to turn it over to the team.
Great. All right. Thank you so much.
Right click, maybe?
Yeah, this is always a thing in the morning. Got it.
There we go. Just let Mary know when you need slide advance.
Okay, go ahead. We're going to start by talking about media curriculum. So media is a pre-K-12 curricular area and is divided into 4 major strands based on a combination of the American Association of School Librarians, National School Library Standards for Learners, and the International Society for Technology for Educators student standards. So we kind of put both of those together to come up with these 4 strands. The first strand, culture of reading, involves helping students become familiar with genres of books, making reading selections that meet their personal needs or interests, and growing in their appreciation for the craft of literature. And that second strand, inquiry, really is all things research. It focuses on teaching students to be skilled and ethical researchers, all the way from the very beginning of developing a topic or a research question. Sorry. No, you're fine. But continuing through selecting relevant resources, gathering information, and synthesizing that information into a product they can share with others to show their learning. The third strand, creation and application, has to do with learning how to solve problems, design new solutions, and collaborate with others on learning projects, often through the use of technology, but can be unplugged as well. The fourth strand, digital citizenship, really focuses on teaching students how to navigate the internet safely and interact with others online in a respectful and ethical way. So in elementary schools, media instruction is delivered in a dedicated once-a-week class for at least 40 minutes. And at the secondary level, media instruction is conducted in collaboration with teachers in other content areas. So media specialists partner with them to deliver instruction in a way that meets their content-specific needs, but also the instructional level of their class. Thank you. So this year in our curriculum writing efforts, we were seeking to develop our resources that we use to support media specialists in several areas. So in elementary, we developed a 3-lesson unit in each grade to work on community building and helping media specialists to establish expectations for just how the Media Center works and how their classroom works with students, and then also to build those early relationships with students at the beginning of the year. Then we also worked on increasing our lesson resources for pre-K. As our pre-K programs are expanding, there's more and more of a need to support our media specialists in meeting the needs of those early learners. We also had a group that worked on computational thinking lessons for elementary, and that really supports that creation and application strand. They worked with Bebot lessons. Every school has access to Bebots, and that really helps them to learn those computational thinking skills. And we're also trying to help our teachers get more comfort with teaching with robotics.
Those little guys that follow the little trail in the path.
That's a different one. The Bebots almost, it really looks like a bee. It's like yellow and black, and they can punch in directions, and then it'll follow the directions that they punch. So you kind of give it a sequence of directions and then say go, and it
Nice.
But it's a really easy to use robot that even like preschoolers can learn how to use. So it's a really great starter robot for learning those skills. So as I mentioned before, the secondary curriculum is taught in collaboration with different subject area teachers in each school, and that can be really specific to that subject area or grade level. But, you know, we want to see successful collaborations be replicated across schools when possible. So this summer, our secondary group worked on creating a new website that would allow media specialists to share collaborations that worked well for them, so that they could also see new collaborations that maybe they could try in their school space. All right, so we also had some program improvements this year. One that I'm sure you're already aware of is in September, we launched the Library Parent Book Preferences opt-in feature. And that feature allows parents to create an account within our library circulation system, and then they can go in and add titles that they do not want their student to have access to check out. And so then, once they've identified those books, if a student tried to check out a book that was on their list, it would just throw up an error message and it would not let them check out that book. And then at the end of May, as we mentioned, we published 2 regulations relevant to school library media. Regulation 50101, the selection and approval of library materials, really formalizes the processes and procedures for how we're selecting and adding materials to library collections. And then Regulation 500-06, the reconsideration of instructional materials already in use, outlines the process and procedures for considering concerns around instructional materials. That of course includes but isn't limited to library materials.
Great, good morning. I want to talk with you a little bit about digital tools and what our digital solutions team does. And maybe starting with a point of clarification that we are not the Department of Technology Infrastructure, right? And DTI works with our infrastructure, things like the network, hardware, Chromebooks. So we are not part of that team. We're actually part of the CII team because we work with the digital tools and stay directly connected to Jody and our other curriculum specialists and supervisors that are actually implementing the vision of, you know, how is that digital tool going to work in our classrooms, things like that. So we're staying, you know, directly connected and kind of another part of their team in all of these cases. So we support over 70 premium tools, as we call them. So these tools, our team works with rostering, setting up sharing rules, ensuring that we're only sharing the data that's absolutely necessary, and also making sure that everything is working and as easy and simple as it possibly can be for our students and our teachers. So that way, if you're a 3rd grade student, you're not getting access to the calculus textbook, and vice versa. And so we make sure, along with Dr. Vetter's team, partner with them to make sure that all of that integration happens. We also handle Schoology integrations so that things can be passed back to grade books and things like that to make sure everything goes smoothly when we have our digital tools. We're also liaison with vendors, so we're the point of contact for all technical administration of digital tools. We also support textbook approval processes, so anytime a curriculum specialist is looking at a new resource, we're usually a part of that process as well to make sure that it's going to function well and also, again, keep it simple and easy to use for teachers and students. We support all of our curriculum specialists with training and documentation to use with teachers, and then troubleshooting. So if any of our teachers have access to a program that we call ServiceNow. And so ServiceNow, if they have any problem, you know, with any digital tool in their classroom, they can submit a ticket, it routes to our team, and then we continue to troubleshoot, and we've served over 1,400 tickets this year alone, this school year. Thanks, Mary. So we also support, you know, kind of several projects across the system, but I want to point out that we facilitate the approval process for all digital tools. So while we are directly connected with CII, we help support that process, and we're the first point of contact to start working with vendors to get all the information that we need. We then are the team that reviews for accessibility, and as Mr. Murphy mentioned earlier about making sure that those tools have the required, assistive technology pieces for equivalent access for our students with disabilities. We then partner with Dr. Vedder's team as they look at data privacy, and with technology infrastructure as they look at network security. And so our team helps facilitate that whole process and make sure that any tools that we choose to purchase or to use in our system have this kind of robust review process. And then, as I mentioned, we are also the team that works directly with Schoology. So we support teachers with using the gradebook and with integrations. We also have teacher leaders that we call Schoology ambassadors. And there's at least one in every building. And so those teacher leaders help support teachers and are kind of a first point of contact for parents that have questions about how to use Schoology, how do I get connected, I'm not understanding this code, the way it's set up in the grade book. And so exactly. Yeah, so those teacher leaders that we, some schools have two, to share those responsibilities. Some have one, and it's their choice how they want to break that down at the school level. And so those ambassadors really help us to support teachers and parents and really students across the system. So with that, we'll turn it over to you guys for any questions.
All right, so I'm going to kind of get out in the weeds here on you a bit, but you mentioned something that really perked my ears. And that was regarding the acquisition of technology. I'm sure you're familiar with policy 434 by the Board of Education. So all technology, according to that policy, must be approved by the director of technology, which would be Ed Gardner. I'd like to know how often you all are actually seeking out his approval versus circumventing the system.
Yeah, so every tool does go through TED. So Mr. Gardner is part of our process. As I mentioned, we review it first with curriculum and instruction to ensure that it aligns with our curriculum standards, that the tool, also that we don't already have something that meets that need, right? If we already have iReady for math, we don't also need 10 other tools that do the same thing. So that's the first line or the first step. Then it would come to my team, and we would look at it for accessibility to make sure that it works with screen readers and there's color contrast and things of that nature. And then it passes on simultaneously. The next step in that process is it goes to Dr. Vedder's team, who looks at it for data privacy, and Mr. Gardner's team to look at it for network security. And so his approval is on every digital tool that would come through our process.
Okay, so yeah, because that's the big thing is understanding how that process works, because it seems that there's some folks here in the school system that is circumventing this policy. So I'm glad to hear you say that. Thank you very much.
Even when there are resources that different departments may purchase, there's an established process that you sort of laid out that may, on the surface, may not appear to be a technology related or influence. There's a very clear process, and DTI is a part of that process.
Thank you for that clarification, Dr. Harris.
Do you know what you guys are doing as far as making sure the parents are aware of the opt-out availability? Because I know that a lot of parents are not. So I'm just kind of wondering, what steps are we taking to make sure that this is out here, the parents know they can do this? And is there anything about when they access the account that they have to log that stuff, that gives them some type of summary? I'm just thinking, do they know I have to come in with the title in mind, or is there something that tips them off to something they might want to consider?
Sure. So we did communicate through our newsletter resources earlier this year when the parent preferences option first came out. We also have it permanently posted on our media services website with links to sign up and things like that. When a parent signs up, they fill out a short Google form for our staff to set up the account for them because we only want to share data of people who are interested. And then they get very specific instructions with screenshots from our vendor of how to set up the account. So it's a pretty clear process, and like I said, the screenshots are super helpful. It's very easy to follow.
I was trying to follow that the other day, and then I got lost in that because Sora is the app that you can download that lets the kids access digital media, the media, library from the school. But was there delays in it in the beginning of the year, in just terms of getting the software up and running and working?
So Sora is actually separate from our.
I'm sorry, I switched topics without letting you know. But to the point of the parent access tool, was there a little bit of a delay at the beginning of the year? Or, because I just remember at the beginning of the year, I was letting parents know it was an option, but they were having trouble finding it. And it may not have been, I don't know if it just wasn't on the media services library at the very beginning.
It wasn't immediately available at the beginning of the school year. I want to say it was mid to late September.
Okay.
Yeah, again, it was
like a month in.
It was new this year.
Yes.
Originally, over the summer, we were going to launch it as a pilot.
Yeah.
Because it was so new and the technology had to be figured out. So the communication admittedly was a little bit slow in the beginning. Right now, it's at the top of the media services webpage. We will move it to back to school time. We will aggressively send reminders out. There are how-tos and screenshots and guides for parents on how to get in there. And so being the first year, I think, communication was probably inconsistent. And that's probably why, to this point, only 2 parents have logged into it. So
Yeah, I know a lot of people have, had no idea that it even existed, and I think that that's, some of what that's the driver. And then just another, so, if I wanted to say, like, I had an elementary school, and, I know some of the, frequently the books have ratings, they'll say like, for ages, recommended for ages 7 up. Is there something like as a parent for me to go like, okay, anything rated, like what are the things, how, is there any way to say like, there's anything that's rated or suggested reading or so that can filter it easier, or is it just like, I gotta come in with a title that I know I wanna not allow access to?
So as far as age appropriateness
and using the resource, right?
Yeah, I'm just looking from the parent, like how user friendly is it, because I have not tried it myself, to say like, look, I don't like this author,
Well, Judy Blume is one of the most
right, like let's just say like I really dislike Judy Blume and I don't want my kid to read anything with Judy Blume, like for whatever reason, that would be. Just trying to think of one off the top of my head. Is there a way on the parent side to say, show me Judy Blume, and then you go like, nope, can't look at that, you can't have that one,
Yes, you can search and see all the books by an author.
Okay.
Is there
and you can narrow it by your school.
Okay.
And is there a filter by age group and that sort of thing too? Just as that's kind of.
Well, there's elementary, middle, and high.
All right.
Okay.
it's so important.
It's not as broad natural filter.
I mean, it's not as specific as individual grade.
Yeah, it's like a natural filter based on elementary, middle, or high school. Okay.
And again, you don't have to opt into this preferences platform to do that. The catalog is on the website. Anything is searchable in the catalog for anyone. Every parent can see the library catalog right now without having to opt in or get to the parent preferences or anything like that. So 2 different things going on. One is the catalog that's online. The other is opting in to withhold books.
Okay, perfect.
I was going to say, that's in the, Dr. Harris had sent back a bunch of answers to the questions that I sent out earlier on Monday. And in there are the links to where the parent access portal is, into the screenshots, and then also to Sora, which is kind of how I was like, downloaded it onto my tablet. But yeah. So there is some options to take a look at that. I did find it, I think when I went to the media services, like it wasn't as obvious as I was expecting it might be. Like, hey, right here is the, parent access portal for those who want to be able to use it. But I also think, not just in this case, but generally speaking, a lot of conversations I have with parents about anything that we're trying to communicate or let them know that we have as an option, when they get a newsletter from the school, first you click on the link to get to the newsletter, then the newsletter will have multiple different links. So you click on a link that says maybe the media services thing. Then it takes you out of the newsletter and you never get back. And if you're sitting at the soccer game or you're sitting somewhere else and there's all these other distractions that parents never getting back to that, and now they've lost the email and the dozens and hundreds of other, or thousands, in my case, other emails that exist in the inbox. So that's something that perhaps just as a system, figuring out how we can get parents fed back to the newsletter, so then they can go back to that next piece on that next bullet item on the newsletter and see all these things. So I think that's how a lot of parents are missing some of these things that we're doing. It's just
Thanks for that. Actually, this summer, we'll be doing a refresh with our website.
Nice.
So I've made a note about that. And one of the goals is trying to reduce the number of clicks that a parent has to make.
Yes. No, that's great. Yes. Okay, just from like the PTA perspective, that's what we've had to do, right? Like if we want to get parents to donate or help out with hospitality, it's got to be one click on the phone, done.
Yes.
And if it takes them out of our PTA email or website, we're lost. They're lost. They're gone. So it's hard. Yeah, that's just the whole thing. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Did you?
I got a question. So regarding book selection, that's always one of the big things that I hear from families, elementary and especially once you get up into the secondary grades. What type of time allotment is being given to students to actually, we're not talking about sitting on computers in the media center or any of that. We're talking about the good old-fashioned, go get a book off the shelf and check out the book. How much time in the media center is actually being allotted to students using it for what the original purpose was, which was to store books and to have a book to take home and read? Because literacy is absolutely important, and certainly reading on the screen is not the greatest for one's eyes.
Sure. So for elementary, I would say it's a minimum of 10 minutes of that 40 minutes each week, often more, especially if it's a lesson that is providing direct instruction around finding a just right book or navigating the media center. So at least a quarter of that time. In secondary, it's not as consistent. Students can certainly, they have open times when students come in throughout the day, and then also teachers can schedule specific times to bring in their classes for book selection. So it's that collaborative piece again of scheduling those classes to come in.
So, so elementary is more fixed.
Yes.
And then,
exactly.
middle and high is more like come in, before, after, whatever the open library times are, more self-service.
More, yes.
Or sort of embedded in something, a project the students may be doing. So the
Kind of a mix.
English classes may be going to the media center to do some research. And there may be some loose time that's sort of built into that time while they're there, but it's maybe in the context of something they're working on.
All right. I was expecting the questions. Okay. You're good? You good? I was just curious as a historical point. We got from school librarian to now we have the media specialist, and we have so much of that coding piece and all that. How did that sort of transition take place? And I think it's amazing, but we don't have the card catalog anymore. Now we've got.
The job has changed.
I love that.
Absolutely.
Right.
In my own experience, I like that aspect of it. It's definitely changed a lot over time, and I personally really love teaching with technology. But specialists have really taken on that role of teaching with technology and incorporating those coding skills really well, and we just continue to try to help people get comfortable with it and expand it.
And really digging into the research, how to do proper research.
Yes.
I believe every website.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, definitely a challenge.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
So our last topic is looking at the agenda for next.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I just
We
had
also, Ms. Munya asked a question about that. So we just bring to you a draft
of the agenda
of a possible layout of the agenda topics for next year. To the
Yeah.
greatest extent possible, we've tried to only keep it to 2 topics per meeting.
Yeah.
Some of them are timely,
Yeah.
such as like at the beginning of the year, we typically like to do professional learning induction when we're working with all our new teachers, or we always bring the course guide updates November-ish because we publish shortly after that.
Makes sense.
Some other things are timely. We also have clustered them by the blueprint pillars just to keep the content sort of clustered and packaged, but this agenda is yours to weigh in on and suggest any changes or things to move around as we go forward.
My only thought was just a curiosity out of, I know as we're rolling out new, like the math literature program, the science of reading, some things are newer rollouts, some things are older rollouts, and now we're just sort of following up with things. So I wasn't sure if there might be, and you guys let me know, if there was like a more natural place to maybe put something just to be able to do either a follow-up on, say, like the science of reading, or, hey, this is how this is actually going to be rolling out for middle school math, right, curriculum, and that sort of thing. I guess that's kind of where I was curious, if there was any other places you guys thought you might want to move something around, just because we do have so many different things happening. And there's some health curriculum bills that we're going through, and, you know, making sure we have some health curriculum, and then we have our sustainability folks, too, whatever Catherine is doing.
You know, during the summer, I know there is a lot of work that staff is doing with science of learning. And so right at the beginning of the school year and then looking into what will be happening during the school year, I think that's good. There'll be a lot of work happening this summer and at the beginning of the school year relative to literacy policy and math policy, so giving us some time to really sort through what is being expected and what we're doing. I think this is a really good timeline for those things.
Okay, good.
And the great thing, you know, from the committee is that if we needed to switch some things, we'd bring it here, and you all have always been open and flexible.
Pretty simple, yeah. That's true. It's pretty straightforward.
So we'll continue to do that as well.
Oh, that's perfect. That's right. That's what I was kind of curious about, because I was like, well, they look exactly the same, but they don't have to be, do they? You know, so I just wanted to put that out there. Yep.
Thank you for the feedback. And so at this point then, we'll plan on taking July off and then coming back in August with early childhood, Judy Centers, and then the work with professional learning and induction. And then anything after that, again, is yours to suggest some improvements.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you guys so much. It is now, 11:50. Look at that. Woohoo! And we are adjourned.
Thank you very
That's my
much.
gavel now.
Thank you.